Robert squeezed my hand 3 times on that hospital bed. He always did that. 3 squeezes meant, "I love you." Then he whispered, "Find the red notebook, Kathy. It is time." I found it 2 days later. Every payday for 20 years, $1,500 wired to someone named Amelia. $780,000. My husband was a high school teacher. We could barely afford groceries. Where did that money come from? And who was Amelia? Thank you for being here with me today. Before we go any further, take a moment to leave a comment. Tell me where you are watching from and what the weather is like where you are right now. I read every single one. If stories about family, sacrifice, and hidden truth matter to you, consider liking the video and subscribing. And just so you know, some parts of this story include fictional elements added for educational and storytelling purposes. Any similarities are coincidental, but the message behind it is very real. Savannah Memorial Hospital smelled the way hospitals always do. Bleach and floor wax and something underneath that no amount of cleaning can cover up. The smell of things ending. I had been sitting in that plastic chair beside Robert's bed for 11 days. 11 days of watching the monitors blink and beep. 11 days of nurses with quiet shoes and careful smiles. 11 days of pretending that if I held his hand tight enough, he would not leave me. Robert Warren. Bobby. To everyone who loved him. 72 years old. High school history teacher at Savannah West for 35 years. The kind of man who wore the same brown corduroy jacket every September because he said it smelled like new beginnings. The kind of man who drove a 1997 Ford truck with 240,000 miles because he said it still ran fine. The kind of man who squeezed my hand 3 times every single night before we fell asleep. Every night for 47 years. The doctors said his heart was giving out. Congestive heart failure. His heart had been working too hard for too long. I wanted to tell them. I already knew that. I had watched Robert tutor kids after school for $15 an hour. Watched him mow lawns on Saturdays. Watched him skip lunch because he said he was not hungry when I knew he was just saving a few dollars. His heart had been working too hard for too long. I did not need a doctor to tell me that. That last morning, October light came through the window pale and golden. Robert would have loved it. He always said October was God's way of apologizing for August. His hand was thin in mine. Every bone, every tendon. This was not the hand that built bookshelves in our living room or carried our daughter Emily on his shoulders through Forsyth Park. This was the hand of a man who was leaving. His eyes opened. Just enough, Kathy. His voice was barely there. Like wind through a screen door. I am right here, Bobby. In my desk drawer, he said. The red notebook. Find it. Read it. Then you will understand why I have been apologizing all these years. I did not understand. Robert apologized all the time. For working late. For missing dinner. For never taking me to Hilton Head, like he promised. I always told him to stop. That I did not need fancy trips. That I just needed him. But lying in that bed with the monitors slowing down, he said it like every apology he had ever given was really about this. About the notebook. About whatever was inside. Bobby, what notebook? What are you talking about? He squeezed my hand. 3 times. I love you. Promise me, he whispered. Promise me you will find it. I promise. His grip loosened, not all at once. Slowly, gently, the way you set something down when you are done carrying it. The monitors changed pitch. A nurse appeared. Then another. Someone put a hand on my shoulder and said words I could not hear because the only sound in the world was the silence where Robert's breathing used to be. He was gone. I sat there holding his hand for a long time after. The nurses let me. They had seen it before. Wives who could not let go. Who kept holding on as if love alone could undo what had already happened. I was not holding on because I thought he would come back. I was holding on because I did not know how to exist in a world where Robert Warren was not in it. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Robert's truck sat where he had parked it 3 weeks ago, before the ambulance came. The porch light was out. Robert always left the porch light on. He said a dark house looks like nobody loves it. Inside, the air was still. The clock ticked. Robert's reading glasses sat on the kitchen table next to a crossword puzzle he never finished. 7 across. 5 letters. A word meaning to carry a heavy load. He had written B-O-R-N-E in pencil. Born. To carry. To endure. I made Earl Grey. Robert's favorite. I made 2 cups out of habit before I realized. I stared at the second cup, then poured it down the sink. That night I lay in our bed staring at the ceiling. His pillow still held the shape of his head. I pressed my face into it. Old Spice and peppermint and something warm that was just him. Just Bobby. I thought about his last words. The red notebook. Find it. But I could not move. Could not think. Could not do anything. But lie in the dark. And listen to the silence where his breathing should have been. The next night was worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The way his eyes looked when he said the word notebook. Not scared. Not sad. Relieved. Like he had been waiting years to say it, and finally could, because he was dying and the secret did not need to be kept anymore. At 2 a.m, I got up. The hallway was dark. I walked past photos of Emily's graduation, Jason's Little League team, our 30th anniversary dinner at that Italian place on River Street that closed years ago. Robert's study was at the end of the hall. A small room. Wooden desk he built himself. Bookshelves crammed with history texts and biographies of Lincoln and King. A framed photo of Robert with his students from 2012, all grinning, holding a banner that said, "Mr. Warren is the greatest of all time." He kept that photo on his desk for 12 years. I sat in his chair. It creaked. The desk lamp made a warm circle of light. I opened the top drawer. Pens, paper clips, pencils. Second drawer. Lesson plans. Stamps. A calculator. The third drawer was locked. Robert never locked anything. He said locks were for people who did not trust the ones they lived with. I stared at that small brass keyhole and felt something cold settle in my chest. The feeling you get when you realize the person you knew best in the world had a part of themselves you never saw. I found the key taped to the underside of the desk. Small, brass. My hands shook as I turned it. A soft click. Inside, beneath old tax returns, was a notebook. Small, red leather cover, worn soft at the edges. No title. No markings. Just plain red. The color of something handled thousands of times. I lifted it out and held it in both hands. It was heavier than it should have been. Not physically. The weight of whatever Robert had been carrying alone. Find the red notebook, Kathy. It is time. I sat at his desk. In his chair. Under the glow of his lamp. Holding the last secret my husband ever kept from me. And I was afraid to open it. I do not know how long I sat there before I finally opened it. Could have been 5 minutes. Could have been an hour. The house was silent except for the clock in the hallway and the occasional creak of the old walls settling in the October cold. My fingers traced the edges of the red leather. Worn smooth. Soft like something that had been picked up and put down 1,000 times. I thought about not opening it. I thought about putting it back in the drawer, turning the key, taping it under the desk, and going to bed. Pretending I never found it. Living the rest of my life with whatever comfortable version of Robert I had built in my head over 47 years. But I had promised him. And I had never broken a promise to Robert Warren in my life. I opened the cover. Robert's handwriting stared back at me. Neat, precise. The same handwriting I had seen on grocery lists and birthday cards, and 35 years of report cards for students who probably never knew how much he cared. But this was not a grocery list. There were no words. Just numbers. The first page was dated 2004. Below the date, one line. Payday. $1,500. For Amelia. I turned the page. Payday. $1,500. For Amelia. I turned another. Payday. $1,500. For Amelia. Same entry. Same amount. Same name. Page after page after page. I started flipping faster, my fingers clumsy now, catching on the paper. 2005. 2006. 2007. The same line repeated every 2 weeks, like a heartbeat that never stopped. Payday. $1,500. For Amelia. My hands were trembling. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I set the notebook flat on the desk and grabbed a pencil from the drawer. The same Ticonderoga pencils Robert bought in bulk. I pulled a scrap of paper from under a stack of lesson plans and started writing. 26 pay periods a year. 20 years. That was 520 payments. 520 times 1,500. I did the multiplication slowly because my hands would not stop shaking and I kept losing my place. When I finished, I stared at the number I had written. $780,000. I checked it again. Then again. The math did not change. $780,000. Gone. Sent to someone named Amelia over 2 decades. By a man who drove a truck with a cracked windshield because he said $200 for a new one was too much. By a man who wore the same Timex watch for 23 years because he said it still tells the time just fine. By a man who ate canned soup 3 nights a week and never once complained. Where did it come from? Robert made $48,000 a year teaching. I made $32,000 at the library. Together, $80,000. After taxes, mortgage, insurance, groceries, and keeping the lights on, there was almost nothing left. Some months we counted pennies to make it to payday. I remembered the winter the furnace broke, and Robert said we could not afford to fix it until spring. We slept in our coats for 3 weeks. Emily sent money, and Robert almost cried because he hated taking it from his own daughter. And the whole time, every 2 weeks, $1,500 was going somewhere else. To someone else. To Amelia. I turned back to the notebook and went through it again, this time slowly. Every entry was identical. No variation, no missed payments, no notes in the margins, just the date, the amount, and that name. For Amelia. Robert had not written anything else. No explanation, no address, no context. Just those 2 words, repeated 520 times over 20 years, like a prayer or a penance. I flipped to the very last page. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before Robert went to the hospital. His handwriting was shakier here. The letters uneven. The pencil pressing harder like his hand was fighting to keep steady. The entry read the same as all the others. Payday. $1,500. For Amelia. But below it, for the first time in the entire notebook, Robert had written something more. 2 lines in small, careful letters. Give Amelia the justice I was too afraid to give her. I am sorry, Kathy. I am so sorry. I read it again. And again. My eyes blurred, and I wiped them with the back of my hand. Give Amelia the justice I was too afraid to give her. What justice? What had Robert been afraid of? And why was he apologizing to me? I closed the notebook and pressed it against my chest. The leather was warm from my hands. I looked up at the wedding photo on the bookshelf. 1977. Robert in a borrowed suit that was too big in the shoulders. Me in a dress my mother had sewn from fabric we bought on sale at the shop on Broughton Street. We were standing on the steps of First Baptist Church, and Robert was grinning like he had just won the lottery. I was laughing because he had stepped on my foot during our first dance and whispered sorry about 14 times. That man. That grinning, clumsy, beautiful man. He had kept this secret from me for 20 years. He had sat across from me at that kitchen table every morning, drinking coffee, doing crosswords, asking about my day. And the whole time he was carrying something so heavy it was killing him. I am sorry, Kathy. I am so sorry. All those times he said it. Hundreds of times over the years. I am sorry I am late. I am sorry I forgot. I am sorry I cannot give you more. And I had always said, stop apologizing, Bobby. You have nothing to be sorry for. But he did. He had something enormous to be sorry for. And he could never tell me what it was. Until now. I stood up. My knees were stiff. My back ached. The clock in the hallway said 3:47 in the morning. I carried the red notebook to the kitchen and set it on the table under the light. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down. $780,000 sent to someone named Amelia. A woman I had never heard of, never met, never knew, existed. Robert had kept her name hidden in a locked drawer for 20 years, and now he was asking me to give her justice. I thought about Jason, my son, his BMW that cost more than Robert made in 3 years, his Tag Heuer watch that caught the light like a small sun, his penthouse in Atlanta that I had seen once in photos Nicole posted online. Jason ran a financial consulting firm, Warren Capital Partners. He told us he was doing well. He told us he had made smart investments. Robert ate canned soup. Jason ate lobster. Something cold moved through my chest. Not grief this time. Something sharper. I did not want to think it. Did not want to let the suspicion form. But it was there now. Sitting in the back of my mind like a stone at the bottom of a well. Who was Amelia? What had Robert been paying for? And did my son know something I did not? I looked at the notebook lying open on the table. The last page. Robert's shaky handwriting. Give Amelia the justice I was too afraid to give her. I closed it. Pressed my palms flat against the red leather. And I made another promise. This time not to Robert. To myself. I was going to find out. Bonaventure Cemetery is the kind of place that makes you believe the dead are still listening. Live oaks older than the country itself arch over the paths. Their branches heavy with Spanish moss that hangs like gray curtains. The graves go back 200 years. Soldiers, poets, children, ordinary people who lived and loved and were forgotten by everyone except the stone that bears their name. Robert would have loved being buried here. He used to bring his students on field trips to Bonaventure every spring and tell them that history is not what happened to famous people. History is what happened to everyone. We buried him on a Thursday. October in Savannah. The air was warm in the sun and cool in the shade, and the smell of salt marsh drifted in from the river. About 40 people came. Neighbors, teachers from Savannah West. A few of Robert's former students, grown now, some with children of their own. Carol Henderson, who lived 3 doors down from us for 28 years, held my hand during the service and whispered, "Bobby was the finest man I ever knew." I nodded because I could not speak. Emily stood beside me. She had flown in from Charleston the day Robert died and had not left my side since. Her husband Daniel stood behind her, one hand on her back, steady and calm. Good man, Daniel. The kind who showed up without being asked and never expected credit for it. Emily was crying quietly. The kind of tears that come from somewhere so deep they do not make a sound. She had been there for everything. The hospital visits, the medications, the nights Robert could not sleep, and I could not do anything but hold his hand. Emily had taken time off work, brought food, sat with her father while I ran errands. She had always been that way, even as a little girl. She was the one who made sure everyone was taken care of before she took care of herself. The minister read from Psalms. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. I tried to listen, but my mind kept drifting. Back to the red notebook. To the number I had written on that scrap of paper at 3 in the morning. $780,000. To the name on every page. Amelia. And to the question that would not stop circling in my head. Who was she? The service was almost over when I heard the car. A low, expensive sound. The kind of engine that purrs instead of rumbles. I did not turn around. I did not need to. I knew the sound of money when I heard it. And that sound did not belong at the funeral of a man who drove a truck with duct tape on the bumper. Jason arrived 20 minutes late. I heard the car door close, then footsteps on the gravel path. He walked across the cemetery lawn in a charcoal suit that fit like it was made for him. Probably was. His wife Nicole walked beside him in a black dress that looked like it came off a runway. Her sunglasses were designer. Her shoes were designer. Everything about her screamed a kind of wealth that Robert and I had never known and never wanted. But it was the watch I noticed first. The sun caught it as Jason raised his wrist to check the time. At his own father's funeral, a flash of silver and blue. TAG. Hoyer. I knew those watches. Not because I had ever owned one, but because Robert and I used to walk past the jewelry store on Broughton Street on our anniversary, and he would point at the window and say, "Who on earth needs a watch that costs more than a semester of college?" Jason did not come forward. He stood at the back of the small crowd with his arms crossed, his face flat. No tears. No grief. Just presence. Like attending a meeting he did not want to be at. Nicole whispered something to him. He shrugged. Lucas stood between them. 12 years old, tall for his age, with Robert's gray eyes and dark hair that fell across his forehead. He looked confused. Lost. Like he knew something important was happening, but no one had explained what. My heart ached for that boy. I had not seen him in almost a year. Jason kept his family separate from us. Always too busy. Always scheduling conflicts. Always next time. Now I looked at my grandson standing beside his father at his grandfather's grave, and I realized he barely knew the man we were burying. After the service, people gathered around me. Hugs, handshakes. The phrases people say when they do not know what else to say. She was lucky to have you. He is in a better place. If there is anything you need, I thank them all because that is what you do. Even when the words feel like sand in your mouth. I looked for Jason. He was near the parking lot, talking on his phone. Not to someone at the funeral, to someone else. Business. From the sound of it, his voice carried across the quiet cemetery, sharp and clipped. I watched him pace beside the BMW, gesturing with his free hand, and the tag Hoyer flashed again in the afternoon light. Emily came up beside me. "You okay, Mom?" I nodded. But I was watching Jason. He finished his call and slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. Kristen said something to him, and they turned toward the car. No goodbye. No hug. No walk over to say I am sorry, Mom. I know this is hard. Nothing. Just the car door opening, the engine starting, and the BMW pulling out of the lot. Lucas looked back at me through the rear window. Just for a second. His face was pale. He raised his hand, a small wave, almost like he was asking for permission. Then the car turned onto Bonaventure Road and they were gone. I stood there among the graves and the Spanish moss and the 40 people who had loved Robert Warren. And I watched my son drive away in a car that cost more than Robert had made in 3 years of teaching. Jason wore a watch worth more than our furnace that broke and could not be fixed. He lived in a penthouse while his father ate canned soup and drove a truck with 240,000 miles. Robert had sent $780,000 to a stranger named Amelia. He had apologized to me every day for 20 years. He had worked himself into an early grave. And Jason? Jason checked his watch at the funeral and left without saying goodbye. Something was wrong. Something beyond the notebook, beyond the money, beyond the name Amelia. Something that connected my husband's secret and my son's wealth and the cold, distant look in Jason's eyes when he stood at the back of his own father's funeral. I did not know what it was. Not yet. But the red notebook was sitting on my kitchen table. And tomorrow, I was going to the bank. 2 days after the funeral, the BMW came back. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the red notebook open in front of me, reading the same entries for the 100th time. Payday. $1,500. For Amelia. I was trying to find something I had missed. A clue, a pattern, anything. But there was nothing. Just the name and the number. Repeated 520 times. The engine pulled me out of it. That low, expensive purr from the cemetery. I looked through the window and saw the black BMW in the driveway behind Robert's truck. Jason sat behind the wheel talking to Nicole. She shook her head at something he said. Then he got out alone. She stayed in the car. He did not knock. Just opened the front door and walked in like he still lived here. He stood in the hallway and looked around the living room, and I watched his eyes move. Not the way a son looks at his childhood home. The way a man looks at a property listing, measuring, calculating. Hey Mom, Jason. He sat down on the couch without being invited. I stayed at the kitchen table. The red notebook was closed now, tucked under a stack of mail. How you holding up? He asked. I am managing. Good. He nodded, but he was not listening. His eyes kept drifting. To the mantel, the china cabinet, the window frames. I could almost hear him adding it all up. Listen, Mom. I have been thinking about Dad's estate. The will. The house. We should start sorting things out. It has been 5 days, Jason. I know. But these things take time. Paperwork, lawyers. He paused. Have you thought about what you are going to do with the house? It is a lot for one person. I have lived here 35 years. Sure. I just mean long term. You are 70, Mom. Roof is past due. Plumbing is original. Maybe downsize, sell the place. There are some really nice assisted living communities. Assisted living. I said it flat. Just an option. He raised his hands, palms out. His Tag Heuer caught the window light. Same flash from the cemetery. I waited. Silence is the most powerful thing you can put in a conversation. People cannot stand it. They fill it. Mom, I need to be honest with you. I am in a tight spot. There it was. What kind of spot? Business. The firm hit a rough patch. Investments that did not pan out. I have got payroll, overhead, client accounts that need restructuring. He said it smoothly, rehearsed. I need about $75,000 to bridge the gap. Temporary. I will pay it back. $75,000. I let the number sit between us. He did not flinch. Just sat there, waiting. Jason, your father worked 35 years and never made more than $52,000 in a single year. We did not take vacations. We ate soup 3 nights a week so we could keep the lights on and pay for your college. And now you want $75,000 because your investments did not work out. His jaw tightened. They were solid investments. The market shifted. Markets shift when people take risks they cannot afford, I said. He leaned forward. Dad would have helped. Dad. I corrected. The word is Dad. He just died. And yes, your father would have given you the shirt off his back and gone cold. He did go cold. Many times. For reasons I am only beginning to understand. Something quick passed across his face. Hard to read. But I saw it. What is that supposed to mean? Nothing. But tell me something. That watch. How much did it cost? Silence. The Tag Heuer, I said. At the funeral, you checked the time during the service. And the BMW outside. And the penthouse Nicole posts online. Last time you visited 3 years ago, you drove a Honda and asked your father for a loan. What changed, Jason? He stood up. Face red. Not embarrassment. Anger. The kind that comes from being seen when you thought you were hidden. That is none of your business. You made it my business when you walked into my house 5 days after your father died and asked for $75,000. We stared at each other. Neither of us moved. Then he turned toward the door. This was a mistake. I should have known better. He pulled the door open hard. The photos in the hallway rattled on their nails. Robert's teaching award. Emily's graduation. Jason's Little League team. Jason's Little League team. W and W. All of them shaking as my son walked out of his father's house for the last time. Through the kitchen window, I watched him cross the yard. Nicole was not looking at Jason. She was looking at the house. At me. Our eyes met through the glass for just 1 second. Her face was not angry. Not smug. There was something else. Something that looked like she was trying to decide whether to be afraid. Then Jason got in. The engine started. The BMW backed out fast. Tires sharp on wet pavement. They turned onto Liberty Street and were gone. I sat in the quiet. The hallway photos still crooked from the slammed door. Robert's glasses still on the kitchen table. The crossword he never finished. The red notebook under the mail. I pulled it out and opened it to the last page. Robert's shaky writing. Give Amelia the justice I was too afraid to give her. My son had just asked me for $75,000 while wearing a watch that cost twice my annual salary. He drove a car Robert could never afford. He wanted to sell the house his father built his life in and put me in a home so he could cash out whatever was left. And somewhere out there, a woman named Amelia had received $1,500 every 2 weeks for 20 years from a man who ate canned soup and drove a truck with 240,000 miles and wore a $40 Timex until the day he died. I closed the notebook. Tomorrow, I was going to the bank, and I was not coming home without answers. The next morning I drove Robert's truck to the bank. It felt strange sitting in his seat. The steering wheel was worn smooth where his hands had gripped it for 27 years. The cab smelled like him. Old Spice and coffee, and the faint sweetness of the peppermints he kept in the console. A receipt from the hardware store was tucked in the visor. $3.49 for a box of nails. That was the last thing Robert Warren ever bought. Savannah First Trust sat on Bull Street in one of those old brick buildings that had been there since before anyone alive could remember. White columns, brass door handles, polished to a shine. Robert and I had opened our joint account here in 1979. Back then you could walk in and shake the manager's hand without an appointment. Things were different now, but the building was the same. I parked and sat there with the red notebook on the passenger seat. Part of me did not want to go in. Part of me wanted to drive home and lock the notebook back in the drawer and pretend none of this was happening. But Robert had asked me to find the truth. And the truth was inside that building. I grabbed the notebook and went in. The lobby was quiet. Marble floors, dark wood counters, a chandelier that had probably been hanging since the 20s. A young man behind the counter smiled. "Can I help you? I need to speak with a manager." "About my husband's account." Robert Warren. His smile shifted. The way faces change when they hear a name attached to someone who is gone. "Let me get Mrs. Crawford." A minute later, a woman came out. Mid-50s, silver hair in a low bun, reading glasses on a chain. She carried herself the way Southern women of a certain age do. Straight back, warm eyes. A handshake that meant something. "Mrs. Warren. I am Helen Crawford. I have managed accounts here for 22 years. She paused. I was very sorry to hear about Robert. He was one of the kindest men who ever walked through those doors. "Thank you. Can we talk somewhere private?" She led me to a small office. Glass walls, neat stacks of files, a potted fern in the corner. She gestured to a chair. "What can I help you with?" I set the red notebook on her desk. "I found this in Robert's things. It is a record of payments. $1,500 every payday for 20 years. To someone named Amelia." Helen turned a few pages. Her expression stayed professional, but recognition moved behind her eyes. "Yes," she said quietly. "I remember." "You remember." Robert came in every other Friday. 10:15 sharp. Like clockwork. He would deposit from his paycheck and transfer $1,500 to another account. Never missed once in 20 years. Did he ever say why? Helen shook her head. I asked once, early on. He said it was a family obligation. I did not press. As long as the funds were there, it was not my place. A family obligation. The words sat heavy. Can you pull up his account? I need to see the full history. Helen hesitated. Mrs. Warren, I can only access accounts where you are listed as a holder. This was Robert's alone. Opened in 2004. I am his wife. And he is gone. I need to know where that money went. She looked at me for a long moment. Policy against compassion. Compassion 1. She turned to her computer. The keys clicked. I sat, trying to keep my hands steady. Outside the glass walls, the bank carried on its ordinary morning. People depositing checks, filling out forms, living without secrets. All right, Helen said. Account opened March 2004. Initial deposit. $10,000. 10,000. I thought back to that year. We did not have 10,000 lying around. Robert was teaching. I was at the library. Where had he gotten it? After that, Helen continued. Regular deposits every payday matching his salary. And transfers. $1,500 every 2 weeks to an account in the name of Grace Dawson, Macon, Georgia. Grace Dawson. Not Amelia. Do you know who she is? Helen asked. No. Never heard the name. Helen scrolled down. The transfers continued 20 years. The last one was 2 weeks before Robert was hospitalized. How much is left? Her face changed. Slightly. The way a number surprises someone even when they should have expected it. $612. I sat back. $612. Robert had put every spare dollar from 35 years of teaching into that account and sent nearly all of it to a woman in Macon. Over $700,000. And all that remained was $612. Helen printed the summary and handed it across the desk. I folded it into my purse with the notebook. Did Robert ever come in with anyone? Did anyone else access this account? Never. Always alone. Always polite. He would make his transaction, say thank you, Helen, and leave. She paused. There was one thing, though. What? The last time he came in. About 3 weeks ago. He looked different. Tired. Thin. I asked if he was all right, and he said he was fine. Then he said something I did not understand at the time. What did he say? Helen looked at me gently. He said, "It is almost over. I can almost stop." I asked what he meant, and he smiled and said, "Thank you. For 20 years of Fridays, Helen, I could not breathe. 20 years of Fridays. Every other Friday. At 10:15, transferring money to a stranger while his wife worked at the library, and his daughter sent cash to fix the furnace, and his son drove a BMW. I stood up. Thank you, Helen. You have been very kind. She walked me to the door. Mrs. Warren, if there is anything else. I nodded and walked out into the Savannah morning. Bull Street was bright with October sun. Tourists with cameras. Horse carriages on cobblestones. The world just going on like nothing had changed. I sat in Robert's truck and unfolded the summary. Printed in neat bank font at the top. Recipient, Grace Dawson. Address in Macon, Georgia, 3 hours east. Grace Dawson. Not Amelia. The money went to Grace. But the notebook said, for Amelia. Mother and daughter, maybe. Or something else. Entirely. I set the paper on the passenger seat beside the notebook. Robert's truck smelled like peppermint and Old Spice. I gripped the wheel where his hands had worn it smooth and thought about what Helen said. It is almost over. I can almost stop. He had known he was dying. And he was relieved. Not because the pain would end, because the payments would. Whatever Robert had been carrying for 20 years, the answer was in Macon. 3 hours east. I started the engine. I did not drive to Macon that day. By the time I left the bank, my hands were shaking too hard to hold the steering wheel steady for 3 hours. I drove home instead. Parked Robert's truck in the driveway next to the empty space where my car sat, and went inside and stood in the kitchen staring at the red notebook on the table. $612. That was all Robert had left behind. A lifetime of teaching, tutoring, mowing lawns, skipping lunches, and at the end, $612 in a notebook full of secrets. I made tea, sat down, opened the notebook again. I had been through it so many times now that the pages fell open on their own, the spines soft from handling. I turned to the last page and read Robert's words again. Give Amelia the justice I was too afraid to give her. I am sorry, Kathy. I ran my thumb along the edge of the back cover. The leather was thicker there, stiffer. I pressed it and felt something underneath, something small and hard, tucked between the leather and the cardboard backing. I turned the notebook over and looked closely. A thin strip of black electrical tape ran along the inside of the back cover. I had not noticed it before, because the leather was dark and the tape blended in. But now, under the kitchen light, I could see the slight ridge where something had been hidden. I peeled the tape back carefully. A small USB drive fell into my palm. Black plastic, no label, no markings. Just a tiny piece of technology that weighed almost nothing but felt like it could change everything. Robert had hidden this inside the notebook. Not on his desk. Not in his files. Inside the notebook itself. Which meant whatever was on this drive was connected to the payments. Connected to Amelia. Connected to whatever he had been too afraid to face while he was alive. I did not own a computer. Robert had used one at school, but at home we never saw the need. I stared at the USB drive and thought about who I could trust. Marcus Blackwell. The name came to me immediately. Marcus had been Robert's closest friend for 30 years. They met when Marcus was a parent volunteer at Savannah West, back when his daughter was in Robert's history class. Marcus ran a small IT repair shop on Habersham Street. Fixed computers for half the businesses in the historic district. Robert used to say Marcus could make a dead hard drive talk. I called him, Kathy? His voice was surprised. It was after 9. How are you doing? Marcus. I need your help. Tonight. There was a pause. Then, I will be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 18. Marcus was 62. Built like a man who had spent his youth carrying things heavier than he should have. Silver beard, kind eyes. The sort of calm that comes from having seen enough of life to know that panicking never helps. He walked in carrying a laptop under his arm. You sounded serious on the phone, he said. I handed him the USB drive. I found this hidden inside Robert's notebook. I need to know what is on it. Marcus looked at the drive, then at me. He did not ask questions. Just sat down at the kitchen table, opened the laptop, and plugged it in. The screen glowed in the dim kitchen. Marcus clicked through folders. His face was still at first. Professional. Then, it changed. Kathy, he said slowly. Where did Bobby get this? I do not know. What is on it? Marcus turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed a spreadsheet, columns of numbers, company names, account balances. At the top, a logo I recognized from Nicole's social media posts. Warren Capital Partners. These are financial records, Marcus said. Client accounts, investment portfolios, fund transfers. But Kathy. He pointed to 2 columns side by side. These numbers do not match. The reported returns are double what the actual account balances show. This is textbook fraud. He is showing clients one set of numbers and keeping a different set for himself. Jason's company. Jason's numbers. My son was stealing from his own clients. There is more. Marcus clicked to the next folder. Audio files. He opened the first one. Jason's voice filled the kitchen. Clear. Confident. The voice of a man who did not know he was being recorded. We moved the new investors' money to cover the old accounts. That is how it works. As long as new money keeps coming in, nobody notices. The day it stops, we are done. So make sure it does not stop. Marcus paused the recording. That is a Ponzi scheme, he said quietly. He is using new client money to pay old clients. When it collapses, and it always collapses, everyone loses everything. I stared at the screen. My son. The boy Robert and I raised. The boy who built model airplanes at this kitchen table. The boy Robert drove to Little League practice every Saturday morning. He was a thief, a fraud. A man who stole from people who trusted him. There is one more file, Marcus said. He clicked it open. Video. Robert's face appeared on the screen. My breath stopped. He was sitting in his study, the same desk, the same lamp, the same bookshelves. But he looked different from the man I remembered. Thin. Gray. His eyes were red, and his hands trembled as he adjusted the camera. Kathy, he said. His voice was weak but steady. If you are watching this, then I am gone, and you found the notebook. I am sorry. I am so sorry for keeping this from you. He took a breath that rattled in his chest. 20 years ago, our son did something terrible. Something that destroyed a young woman's life. I found out, and I made a choice. The wrong choice. I chose to protect him, instead of doing what was right. I have been paying for that choice every payday for 20 years. $1,500 to Grace Dawson in Macon, for her daughter Amelia. For the girl Jason hurt. I could not move. Could not breathe. Robert continued. I also know what Jason has become. The company he built is a lie. He is stealing from his clients. I have been collecting evidence for years. It is all on this drive. The financial records, the recordings, everything. His eyes glistened. I love him, Kathy. He is my son, and I love him. But I cannot protect him anymore. What I did was wrong. Amelia deserved better. His clients deserve better. You deserve better. Robert's voice broke. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Kathy, you are the bravest person I have ever known. I was not brave enough while I was alive. But you are. Please, finish this. For Amelia. For us. Do what I could not. The screen went black. Marcus and I sat in silence. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the street. Normal sounds. In a world that was no longer normal. Marcus closed the laptop slowly. Bobby kept all of this for years, he said. The financial records, the recordings, the video. He was building a case, Kathy. Against his own son. I looked at the dark screen where Robert's face had been. My husband. My quiet, gentle, soup-eating, truck-driving, hand-squeezing husband. He had spent 20 years paying for Jason's crime and collecting evidence of Jason's fraud. He had been too afraid to act while he was alive. Too afraid of losing his son. So he had prepared everything and left it for me. He knew someday it would come to this, Marcus said. I pressed my palms against the table. The red notebook lay between us. The USB drive beside it. Two small objects. The weight of 20 years inside them. Robert had not just been hiding a secret. He had been preparing me to finish what he started. And now that someone was me, I left before dawn. The highway was empty at that hour. Just me and Robert's truck, and the red notebook on the passenger seat. And 3 hours of Georgia between Savannah and whatever was waiting for me in Macon. The sky turned pink over the pine flats along I-16. Georgia in October is beautiful in a quiet way. Not loud like the mountains or dramatic like the coast. Just flat land and tall pines, and the occasional church steeple rising above the tree line. Robert used to love this drive. He made it more than I knew. Every few weeks he would tell me he was visiting an old friend from college. He would leave on a Saturday morning and come back in the evening. Tired, but calm. I never questioned it. Never asked which friend. Never wondered why he always drove east. Now I knew. There was no old friend. There was Grace Dawson and her daughter Amelia, and a secret my husband carried down this highway for 20 years. I stopped once for gas and coffee at a station outside of Dublin. The woman behind the counter had a kind face and a name tag that said Patrice. She looked at me the way people look at someone who has not slept enough and said, "You all right, honey?" I told her I was fine. She did not believe me, but she let it go. That is the thing about the South. People see your pain and offer you kindness, and do not push when you say you are okay. I got back on the highway. The coffee was too hot and too strong, and I drank it anyway. Macon appeared around 9:30. Bigger than I expected. Old brick buildings downtown, churches on every corner, a river running through the middle of it. I followed the GPS to an address on the east side of town. Residential neighborhood. Small houses, chain-link fences, yards where people grew tomatoes and kept lawn chairs on the porch. Working class. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody and nobody has much, but nobody goes without. Grace Dawson's house was at the end of a cul-de-sac. White clapboard, green shutters, a porch with 2 rocking chairs and a hanging fern. Modest, but clean. Cared for. I parked on the street and sat there for a minute. I had driven 3 hours to knock on a stranger's door and ask her about a secret my dead husband kept for 20 years. I did not know what I would find. Did not know if Grace would talk to me or slam the door in my face. Did not know if I was ready for whatever she had to say. But I had promised Robert. And I had promised myself. I walked up the porch steps and knocked. Footsteps inside. Slow. Cautious. The door opened halfway. A woman stood behind it. Mid-60s. Thin. Hair pulled back in a gray braid. Her face had the kind of tiredness that does not come from one bad night. It comes from years. She looked at me with guarded eyes. "Can I help you?" "My name is Catherine Warren," I said. "I am Robert Warren's wife." The color left her face. Her hand tightened on the door frame. For a second I thought she was going to close it. Then her shoulders dropped, and she exhaled like she had been holding her breath for 20 years. "I wondered when you would come," she said quietly. "Come in." The living room was small and neat. A couch covered in a crocheted blanket. Photos on every wall. A young girl in a graduation cap. The same girl blowing out birthday candles. The same girl standing by a lake in a yellow sundress, laughing at something outside the frame. Beautiful. Maybe 17 in the photo. Eyes bright, smile wide. The kind of face that had not yet learned how unfair the world could be. "That is Amelia," Grace said. She saw me looking. Before I sat down. Grace sat across from me in a worn armchair. Between us, a coffee table with a Bible and a TV remote and a glass of water that had been sitting there long enough to collect dust on the surface. I reached into my bag and pulled out the red notebook. I set it on the coffee table. Grace stared at it. Her eyes filled. "He kept a record," she whispered. "Every payment," I said. "For 20 years. $1,500. Your name. And one word on every page. Amelia." Grace pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she did not wipe them away. "Mrs. Dawson," I said gently, "I need to know what happened. Robert is gone. And before he died, he asked me to give Amelia justice. I cannot do that, unless I understand." Grace nodded. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and took a long breath. The kind of breath you take before you say something you have been carrying too long. "It was September," she said. 2004. Amelia was 19. She was a sophomore at the University of Georgia in Athens, studying education. She wanted to be a teacher, just like. She stopped. "Just like your husband." I felt something crack inside my chest. "There was a party," Grace continued, "at one of the dormitories. A boy was hosting it. I did not know his name then. I learned it later. Jason Warren. The room went very still. He was serving alcohol. Beer, liquor, mixed drinks. Amelia did not drink much. She was not that kind of girl. But it was a party, and she was 19, and she wanted to fit in. She had too much. Everyone had too much. Grace's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. The dormitory had balconies on the upper floors. Third floor. Amelia went outside for air. She was dizzy, leaning on the railing. And then, Grace stopped, closed her eyes. She fell, she said. 3 stories. Landed on the concrete below. Someone screamed. People ran. And your son. She opened her eyes and looked at me. Your son ran too. But not toward her. Away. He called his father instead of 911. By the time the ambulance arrived, Amelia had been lying on that concrete for almost 20 minutes. I could not speak. My hands were gripping the edge of the couch, so hard my knuckles were white. She hit her head, Grace said. Traumatic brain injury. They told me at the hospital that she might not survive the night. She did. But she lost the ability to walk. Lost the ability to speak the way she used to. Lost everything she was supposed to become. Grace's tears were falling freely now. Your husband came to the hospital, she said. 3 a.m. I was sitting in the waiting room alone. My ex-husband was gone. I had no one. And this man walked in, a stranger. And he looked at me, and she broke. He cried. Mrs. Warren. Your husband stood in that hallway and cried, like I had never seen a man cry. Grace wiped her eyes and kept going. Like once she started, she could not stop. Like the story had been pressing against the inside of her chest for 20 years, and now that it was finally coming out, it would not wait. He sat with me until morning, she said. Your husband. In that waiting room with the bad coffee and the fluorescent lights. He did not say much. He just sat there. And when the doctor came out and told us Amelia was alive but that she would never walk again, never speak the way she used to, Robert put his head in his hands and said, This is my fault. I did not understand. Grace continued. I did not know who he was. I asked him. He told me. He said, My son did this. My son was at that party. He was serving the alcohol. He saw your daughter fall and he ran. He called me instead of calling for help. And Grace paused. I wanted to kill him. I wanted to call the police right there. I wanted his son arrested, charged, locked up. Why didn't you? I asked. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Grace looked down at her hands. Because I could not afford to, she said. I was a nurse at a small clinic. No savings. No family to help. My ex-husband disappeared when Amelia was 6. The hospital bills were already piling up. Surgery, specialists, rehabilitation. They were talking about long-term care facilities. Numbers I could not even imagine. She took a breath. Robert came to me 2 days later. He sat right where you are sitting now. And he said, I will pay for everything. Every doctor, every therapy, every bill. For as long as it takes. He said he would wire $1,500 every 2 weeks. And he asked me not to go to the police. And you agreed. Grace's face crumpled. I hated myself for it. Every single day. But my baby was lying in that hospital bed, with tubes coming out of her head. And I had $11 in my checking account. $11, Mrs. Warren. So yes, I agreed. Because I did not have a choice. The room was quiet. I could hear birds outside. A lawnmower somewhere down the street. Ordinary sounds on an ordinary morning, in an ordinary neighborhood where nothing was ordinary anymore. Did Jason know? I asked. Did he know his father was paying you? Grace shook her head. Robert said he would handle it. Said Jason did not need to know. He wanted to protect him. He wanted to protect everyone. I said quietly. Except himself. Grace nodded. I need to see Amelia, I said. Grace studied my face for a long moment. Then she stood. I will take you. We drove 5 minutes to a residential care facility on the other side of town. Single-story brick building. Clean. Well kept. But small. The kind of place that runs on good intentions and not enough funding. A sign out front read Macon Community Care. Grace led me through the front door. The woman at the reception desk smiled and said, "Hey, Miss Grace." "She is in the art room." The art room was at the end of a hallway lined with framed paintings. Flowers mostly. Bright colors. Thick strokes. The kind of dozens of sunflowers, golden and towering and burning, with a kind of joy that did not match the place they were hanging in. "Amelia painted those," Grace said. She saw me looking. Every one of them. We stepped through the doorway and I saw her. Amelia Dawson. 39 years old. Sitting in a wheelchair by a window where the morning light poured in like honey. She was thin. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Her hands rested in her lap still. But her eyes were bright, alert, full of something I did not expect. Not sadness, not anger, life. She had a paintbrush held between her teeth. In front of her, propped on an easel, was a canvas half covered in yellow and gold. Another sunflower. She was painting it with her mouth. Her head moving in small, careful strokes. Each one deliberate. Each one an act of will that most people could never imagine. Grace knelt beside the wheelchair. "Baby," she said softly. "This is Mrs. Warren. She is Robert's wife." Amelia looked at me. Her eyes searched my face. Then she smiled. Not a big smile. A gentle one. The kind that says, "I know who you are, and I have been waiting." A letterboard sat on a tray attached to the wheelchair. Whiteboard. Black letters. Amelia looked down at it and began pointing. Slowly, one letter at a time, her eyes moving from the board to Grace, who read each letter aloud. E. O. U. R. Your. H. U. S. B. A. N. D. Your husband. S. A. F. E. D. Saved. Met. My. L. I. F. E. Your husband saved my life. I could not hold it together after that. The tears came hard and fast, and I did not try to stop them. I knelt beside Amelia's wheelchair and took her hand. It was warm and still and small in mine. Grace stood behind us, crying quietly. "He came every month," Grace said. "Robert. For 20 years. He would drive down from Savannah on a Saturday. He used a different name at the front desk. David Mitchell. He would sit with her for an hour. Read to her. Talk to her about history." She pointed to a shelf by the window. A stack of books. Biographies of Harriet Tubman and Eleanor Roosevelt and Rosa Parks. Robert had brought them. "He never told me," I whispered. "He said it was better that way," Grace said. "Said he did not want to burden you with his guilt." I looked at Amelia, at the painting on the easel, at the sunflowers on the walls. This woman had lost everything at 19 years old. The ability to walk, to speak, to live the life she was meant to live. And she had responded by painting sunflowers. Golden, radiant, alive. Every single one of them. An act of defiance against what had been taken from her. My son had taken everything from this woman. My husband had spent 20 years trying to give some of it back. In secret. In silence. In shame. In the said. I squeezed Amelia's hand. She squeezed back. Once. Twice. And then a third time. 3 squeezes. "I love you." The same thing Robert did every night. He taught her that, Grace said softly. On one of his visits. He told her it was how you say, "I love you," without words. I drove back to Savannah in silence. No radio. No phone calls. Just the highway. And the pine trees. And the weight of everything I now carried. The red notebook sat on the passenger seat beside the account summary from the bank. On the floor behind my seat, a small canvas wrapped in brown paper. A sunflower Amelia had painted. Grace insisted I take it. 3 hours of silence. 3 hours of thinking about Robert eating canned soup while Jason ate lobster. About Robert driving this highway every month to sit with a woman his son had destroyed. About Amelia painting sunflowers with her mouth while Jason built penthouses with stolen money. I gripped the steering wheel where Robert's hands had worn it smooth. And I made a decision. Robert had asked me to give Amelia justice. He had given me the evidence. The notebook, the USB drive, the video, everything I needed. Tomorrow I would call Emily. Then I would find a lawyer. And then, God help me, I was going to finish what my husband started. I had barely set my keys on the kitchen counter when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. The kind that does not wait for you to be ready. I was still carrying the brown paper package with Amelia's sunflower painting under my arm and the red notebook in my bag, and 3 hours of highway silence in my bones. I set the painting on the table and walked to the door. A young man stood on the porch, late 20s, khakis, polo shirt, holding a manila envelope. He had the stiff, uncomfortable look of someone who did not enjoy this part of his job. Catherine Warren? That is me. You have been served. He held out the envelope. Have a good day, ma'am. He turned and walked to a white sedan at the curb before I could ask a single question. The car pulled away, and I stood there in the doorway holding the envelope with my name printed across the front in bold black letters. My hands were steady as I tore it open. They did not start shaking until I read the first line. Petition for guardianship and conservatorship. Petitioner, Jason Michael Warren. Respondent, Catherine Ann Warren. I read it twice. Then a third time. The words did not change. Jason was suing me. My own son was taking me to court. The petition claimed I was mentally incompetent due to age and grief, that I was vulnerable to manipulation by outside parties, that I could no longer manage my own affairs. It requested the court appoint Jason as my legal guardian and conservator, granting him full control over my home, my finances, my medical decisions. Everything. I lowered the papers and stared at the hallway wall. Robert's teaching award. Emily's graduation photo. The family portrait from 1992. All 4 of us on the porch steps. Jason, maybe 15, grinning, his arm around Robert's shoulders. That boy. That grinning boy. He was trying to erase me. I knew what this was. This was not about my health. This was not about concern for his aging mother. This was Jason finding out I was asking questions. This was Jason feeling the walls closing in. He had filed this petition to shut me down before I could shut him down. If a judge granted it, I would lose my voice, my home, my right to act, to testify, to hire a lawyer. Jason would control everything, and the red notebook and the USB drive and Robert's video would disappear into a drawer that would never be opened again. I picked up the phone and called Emily. She answered on the second ring. Mom? Are you okay? You sound. Jason filed a guardianship petition against me. Silence. Then what? He is trying to have me declared incompetent. He wants control of everything. The house, the finances, my medical decisions, all of it. Emily's voice went cold in a way I had never heard from my daughter. That son of a... She caught herself. When did you get this? 10 minutes ago. Do not sign anything. Do not talk to anyone. I am calling Patricia Nguyen. She is the best civil and criminal attorney in Savannah. I worked with her on a case last year. She will know what to do. Emily, there is something else. I need to tell you everything, I told her. All of it. The notebook, the USB drive, the video, Grace, Amelia, the sunflowers, the Ponzi scheme. Everything Robert had hidden and everything I had found. Emily listened without interrupting. When I finished, the line was silent for a long time. Mom. Her voice cracked. Amelia. Oh, God. I know. And Jason? He knew? All this time? He caused it. And your father paid for it. Emily was crying. I could hear her trying to hold it together and failing. Daniel's voice murmured in the background. Then Emily came back. Steadier. I am calling Patricia right now. Do not leave the house. I will call you back in 30 minutes. She called back in 20. Patricia Nguyen would see me at 4 o'clock. Her office was on Drayton Street above a bookshop. I arrived 10 minutes early. The waiting room was small and clean. Dark wood, leather chairs, framed degrees on the wall. A receptionist with kind eyes told me to sit. At 4 sharp, a door opened, and Patricia Nguyen walked out. She was about 50. Black hair cut short, sharp eyes behind frameless glasses, the posture of someone who spent her life standing up straight in courtrooms. She shook my hand firmly and led me into her office. Mrs. Warren. Emily told me the broad strokes. I need details. I set everything on her desk. The red notebook, the USB drive, the account summary from Savannah First Trust, the guardianship petition. And I talked. From the beginning. Robert's death. The 3 squeezes, the notebook, the bank, Marcus, and the USB. The drive to Macon, Grace, and Amelia. The sunflower paintings. Everything. Patricia listened without interrupting. She read the notebook. She opened the USB on her laptop and scanned the financial files. She listened to the recording of Jason's voice. She watched 30 seconds of Robert's video before pausing it. She sat back and looked at me. Mrs. Warren, this is not just a civil matter. This is federal criminal. Extortion, fraud, conspiracy, operating a Ponzi scheme across state lines. If the FBI opens an investigation, and they will, your son is looking at serious prison time. Good, I said. Patricia nodded. But first we stop this guardianship. If Jason succeeds, you lose everything. Your standing, your testimony, your ability to even hire me. So we move fast. How fast? I will file an emergency motion to dismiss the petition tomorrow morning. Request an independent competency evaluation to prove you are of sound mind. Simultaneously, I will prepare a referral package for the FBI field office in Savannah with copies of all the financial evidence. She paused. You have 72 hours, Mrs. Warren. That is how long before Jason's petition reaches a judge. 72 hours. 3 days. Can you do it? Patricia looked at me over her glasses. Your husband spent 20 years building this case. Emily tells me you drove to Macon alone, confronted a stranger, and sat with the woman your son destroyed. She almost smiled. I think you can handle 3 more days. I stood to leave. At the door, I stopped. Patricia. Emily mentioned something on the phone. She said Nicole called her yesterday, Jason's wife, asking strange questions about Robert's estate, about whether Robert had any separate accounts. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Nicole is asking questions? Emily said she sounded nervous, like she was looking for something. Patricia wrote it down. That could be useful. If Nicole knows something and is willing to talk, it changes the game. Keep me posted. I drove home as the sun set. Drayton Street was quiet. Spanish moss glowed gold in the last light. 72 hours. 3 days before Jason's petition could strip everything away. 3 days to finish what Robert started. He had carried this for 20 years. I only needed to carry it for 3 more days. The phone rang at 11:14 on a Tuesday night. I know the exact time because I was staring at the clock on the kitchen wall. The same clock Robert had hung 31 years ago. Slightly crooked, with a faded rooster painted on its face. I had not slept more than 3 hours in 2 days. Patricia's words kept circling my head like vultures. 72 hours, Mrs. Warren. That is all we have before a judge can sign Jason's petition and hand him everything. I picked up on the second ring. The voice on the other end was quiet. almost a whisper, as though the person was cupping the phone with both hands. "Mrs. Warren. It is Nicole. Please, do not hang up." I did not hang up. I gripped the receiver and pressed my back against the kitchen counter. Through the window, the street was empty. Oak branches scratched the glass like fingernails. "I need to come inside," she said. "Jason does not know I left. I parked 2 blocks away on Gaston Street. Please, I have something you need to see." 3 minutes later, I opened the front door. Nicole stood on the porch in a gray sweatshirt and jeans, no makeup. Her hair pulled into a messy knot. She looked 10 years older than the woman I had seen at the funeral. Under her arm, she carried a black laptop bag, clutching it the way a mother clutches a child in a crowd. I stepped aside. She walked straight to the kitchen table and sat down without a word. I poured 2 glasses of water. Neither of us drank. "He is going to run," Nicole said. She unzipped the bag and pulled out a silver MacBook. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The screen lit up the dim kitchen with a pale blue glow, and I saw a reflection of the red notebook sitting on the counter behind me. It looked like a ghost floating in the glass. Nicole turned the laptop toward me. An email thread filled the screen. The subject line read, "Exit timeline." The sender was Jason's private address. The recipient was listed as K. Marchetti. I did not recognize the name, but Patricia would. "Read the 3rd paragraph," Nicole whispered. I leaned forward. The words were clinical, precise. The language of a man who had practiced deception so long it had become his native tongue. Phase 3. Liquidation. Transfer remaining client capital to Cayman National Trust. Account ending 7741. Complete by Thursday. Close of business. Confirm passport pickup with courier. The email was dated 2 days ago. "He has been moving money out of Warren Capital for weeks," Nicole said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I found the emails last Wednesday. He forgot to clear the trash folder on his home computer. There are dozens of them." She scrolled down. More emails. Wire instructions. Account numbers. Names I had never heard. Each message was a small brick in a wall Jason had been building between himself and the consequences Robert had tried to hand him. Then Nicole opened a folder labeled Documents. Inside were 2 scanned images. The first was a United States passport. Jason's photograph stared back at me, but the name printed beside it was James David Walker. Date of birth: off by 1 year. Place of birth: changed from Savannah to Atlanta. The gold eagle on the cover looked almost real, but the edges of the scan were slightly uneven, as if someone had photographed it on a kitchen counter in a hurry. The second image was a flight confirmation. Delta Airlines. One way. Atlanta to Grand Cayman. Departure: Thursday at 6:45 in the morning. 2 passengers. James Walker. Lucas Walker. My hand went to my mouth. Lucas. My grandson. 12 years old. Gray eyes like Robert's. The boy who had waved at me from the back of the cemetery. The boy who built model airplanes on my living room floor. "He is taking my grandson," I said. The words came out flat, as if the air had been punched from my lungs. Nicole nodded. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them. "Jason told Lucas they are going on a fishing trip. Lucas packed his backpack this afternoon. He put his model airplane inside because he wants to finish painting it on the beach." I closed my eyes. I saw Robert's hand squeezing mine 3 times. I heard his voice in the hospital room. "Find the red notebook, Kathy. It is time." He had known. Somehow, even from the edge of death, Robert had known that Jason would run. I opened my eyes and looked at the clock. 11:38. Thursday morning was less than 48 hours away. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. I had to ask. I had learned in the past week that trust was something Robert had spent 20 years earning, and Jason had spent 20 years destroying. Nicole met my gaze. "Because Lucas is my son too. And because I watched your husband visit a woman in a wheelchair every month for years and never understood why until I read the petition Jason filed against you." She paused. "I married a man I did not know. I will not let my son become a man I cannot recognize." I reached for the phone and dialed Patricia's number. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice heavy with sleep. "Patricia, it is Kathy Warren. Nicole is here. Jason has a fake passport and a flight to Grand Cayman on Thursday morning. He is taking Lucas." Silence. Then Patricia's voice sharpened like a blade pulled from a drawer. "Do not leave the house. Either of you. I am calling Agent Torres right now. We just lost 24 hours. I hung up. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the laptop and the tick of Robert's crooked rooster clock. The blue light from the screen fell across the table, catching the red notebook on one side and Amelia's sunflower painting on the other. Two pieces of evidence. Two kinds of truth. One built in secret over 20 years. The other handed to me by a woman I had barely spoken to before tonight. Nicole wrapped her hands around the glass of water and finally drank. 48 hours. The clock was ticking. I woke before the sun. Wednesday morning. 31 hours left. The house smelled like dust and grief and old coffee. I lay in bed for exactly 4 seconds, staring at the ceiling fan that Robert had installed the summer Lucas was born. Then I got up, washed my face, tied my hair back, and walked to the kitchen. I was going to bake a pecan pie. That probably sounds strange. A woman with 31 hours to stop her son from fleeing the country, and she decides to bake. But Robert always said you could tell the truth about a person by watching what they did with their hands when they were afraid. My hands needed flour. They needed sugar. They needed the worn wooden rolling pin that had belonged to Robert's mother. The one with the small crack on the left handle that I had never fixed, because Robert said the crack gave it character. Patricia called at 6:15. Her voice was sharp, caffeinated, already 3 steps ahead. "Agent Torres is on board," she said. "The Bureau has been watching Warren Capital for 5 months. Nicole's documents filled in the gaps they needed. Torres wants Jason on domestic soil when they move. If he boards that plane tomorrow, extradition from the Caymans could take years. So we need him here," I said. "We need him in a room where he feels safe enough to talk. Somewhere familiar. Somewhere he would not expect a trap." I looked at the kitchen table. 4 chairs. Robert's chair still pushed in at its usual angle, as though he had just stepped away to refill his coffee. "I will invite him to dinner," I said. Patricia paused. I heard her pen stop clicking. "Dinner. Wednesday night. A family dinner. I will tell him I have been thinking about the bridge loan, that I want to discuss it over a meal. Like civilized people. He will come. Jason never turns down an opportunity when he thinks he is winning." Another pause. Then Patricia exhaled slowly. "That could work. Torres can have a team in a van on the next block. We wire the dining room. You wear a mic under your blouse. All you need to do is keep him talking." "I have been keeping that boy talking since he was 2 years old," I said. "I think I can manage one more evening." After we hung up, I opened the pantry. Pecans, dark corn syrup, vanilla extract, the good bourbon Robert kept on the top shelf for special occasions. I cracked eggs into a bowl and watched the yolks break like small suns. Robert's recipe was taped inside the cabinet door, written in his careful teacher's handwriting. 3 cups pecans, 1 cup syrup, 1 tablespoon bourbon, pinch of salt. He had added a note at the bottom in pencil. "For Jason, he always comes back for the pie." My throat tightened. Robert had known his son better than anyone, known the charm and the greed and the weakness underneath both. And still, he had loved him enough to write his name on a recipe card and tape it inside a cabinet where it would be found. I rolled the dough, pressed it into the pan, poured the filling, and arranged the pecans in neat circles, the way Robert liked. The kitchen filled with the sweet, heavy smell of brown sugar and bourbon, and for a moment I could pretend this was just another Wednesday, just another pie, just another dinner with my family. But the red notebook sat on the counter beside the stove, and Amelia's sunflower painting leaned against the wall near the back door. And upstairs in the guest room, Nicole was sleeping with her phone clutched to her chest, waiting for a signal that her son was safe. At 9:30, I called Jason. He picked up on the first ring. His voice was smooth, relaxed. The voice of a man who believed he was still in control. "Mom." "What a surprise." "I have been thinking," I said. I kept my tone soft, a little tired, a little defeated. The voice of a 70-year-old woman who had decided to give in. About the bridge loan, about the house, about everything. "I think we should sit down and talk. As a family." "That sounds reasonable," Jason said. I could almost hear him smile. "Come for dinner tonight. 7 o'clock. I am making your father's pecan pie." A beat of silence. I held my breath. The clock on the wall ticked twice. "Pecan pie," he repeated. Something shifted in his voice. A crack, thin as a hair, that closed almost before I could hear it. "Dad's recipe?" "The same one. 3 cups pecans. 1 tablespoon bourbon. I will be there at 7. He hung up. I set the phone on the counter and pressed both palms flat against the cool tile. My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my wrists. At 4 o'clock, Emily arrived from Charleston. She hugged me in the doorway and did not let go for a long time. Behind her, a gray sedan parked on the opposite side of the street. 2 men in dark jackets sat inside. They did not look at the house. They did not need to. Patricia came at 5. She brought a small black device, no bigger than a button, and pinned it inside the collar of my blouse. She tested it twice, speaking into her phone while standing in the backyard, listening through an earpiece. Satisfied, she squeezed my shoulder. "You are the bravest woman I have ever represented," she said. "I am the most terrified woman you have ever represented," I answered. But Robert did not raise me to run. At 6:45, the pie came out of the oven. Golden brown. Perfect crust. The smell filled every room in the house like a memory you could taste. I set it on the counter beside the red notebook and the sunflower painting. 3 objects on a kitchen counter. 3 truths waiting to be spoken. At 6:58, I heard the low growl of a BMW turning onto Liberty Street. I smoothed my blouse, touched the small button mic at my collar, and opened the front door. Jason walked through the front door at exactly 7 o'clock. He was never late when he believed he was about to get something. He wore a navy sport coat over a white shirt, no tie. The Tag Heuer catching the hallway light the way it always did. He carried a bottle of wine in one hand and a smile that he had practiced in the mirror. I knew that smile. I had watched it grow from a boy's charm into a man's weapon. "Smells incredible, Mom," he said. He kissed my cheek. His lips were cool. "Dad's pecan pie. You really went all out." "Sit down," I said. "Dinner is ready." The dining room looked the way it always looked for family meals. White tablecloth. The good china Robert and I had received as a wedding gift 47 years ago. Candles lit in the center. 4-place settings. Robert's chair sat empty at the head of the table, and I had set his plate and glass there on purpose. A ghost seat. Jason glanced at it, then looked away. Emily sat across from him. She wore a calm expression that I knew cost her everything. My daughter was a pediatrician. She had spent her career comforting frightened children. Tonight, she was comforting herself. I served the food. Roast chicken. Green beans from Carol Henderson's garden. Cornbread. Sweet tea. The kind of meal Robert would have loved. The kind we ate on Sundays before Jason stopped coming home. I watched Jason eat. He cut his chicken with precise, controlled movements, the way he did everything. Every gesture calculated. Every word measured. "This is nice," he said, looking around the table. "We should do this more often." "Yes," I said. "We should." I let the conversation drift for 15 minutes. Jason talked about a development project in Midtown. Emily asked polite questions. I refilled glasses and passed the cornbread basket and waited. Beneath my blouse, the small black mic recorded every clink of silverware, every swallow of sweet tea, every carefully constructed sentence my son offered like a gift he expected to be repaid. Then I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter. The red notebook was where I had left it, beside the pecan pie and Amelia's sunflower painting. I picked it up. The leather was warm from sitting near the oven. I carried it back to the table and set it down between the candles, directly in front of Robert's empty plate. Jason's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "What is that?" he said. It was not a question. His voice had changed. The smoothness was gone, replaced by something flat and metallic, like a door locking from the inside. "Your father left this for me," I said. I sat down. I opened the notebook to the first page. The handwriting was Robert's. Neat, careful. The handwriting of a man who had spent 40 years writing lesson plans on a chalkboard. Payday, $1,500. For Amelia. I turned the page. Same entry. Same amount. Same name. He wrote this every 2 weeks for 20 years, Jason. 520 entries. $780,000. I looked at my son. "Do you know who Amelia is?" Jason set his fork down. He placed both hands flat on the table, fingers spread, the Tag Heuer glinting beside the white china. His jaw tightened. I could see the muscles working beneath the skin. "Mom, I do not know what Dad was doing with his money. He was a teacher. Teachers do strange things when they get old. You know that." "Amelia Dawson," I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. 19 years old. Sophomore at the University of Georgia. September 2004. A party in a dormitory. A third-floor balcony. A fall. The color drained from Jason's face. It happened slowly, like paint thinning in water. First the cheeks, then the forehead, then the lips. Emily gripped her napkin under the table. I could hear her breathing. She lay on the concrete for 20 minutes, I continued. Nobody called 911. Somebody called his father instead. A history teacher in Savannah who drove 3 hours in the middle of the night and found a girl broken on a sidewalk. "Stop," Jason said. "Amelia cannot walk. She cannot speak without a letterboard. She paints sunflowers with a brush held between her teeth." I touched the notebook. "Your father paid for her care. Every payday. $1,500. For 20 years. He gave up vacations, new clothes, a new truck. He ate canned soup 3 nights a week, so that the girl you left on the concrete could have a bed and a nurse and paint." Jason pushed his chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound like a small scream. He stood up. His hands were shaking. The confident man who had walked through my door 40 minutes ago was gone. In his place stood someone I recognized from a long time ago. A 20-year-old boy standing in our kitchen at 3 in the morning, mud on his shoes, terror in his eyes, whispering, "Dad, I did something. You do not know what you are talking about," he said. But his voice broke on the last word. I turned to the final page of the notebook. Robert's handwriting here was different. The letters trembled. They leaned to the right, as though the hand that wrote them was running out of time. I read the words aloud, slowly, the way Robert would have wanted. "Give Amelia the justice I was too afraid to give her. I am sorry, Kathy. Finish what I started." Jason stared at the page. His mouth opened. No sound came out. I closed the notebook and placed my hand on its cover. The leather was still warm. "Sit down, Jason," I said. "I am not finished." I reached under the table and pulled out Marcus Blackwell's laptop. I had placed it there before Jason arrived. Plugged into the outlet beside the china cabinet. Screen closed. Waiting. The way Robert had waited for 20 years. Jason watched me open it. His eyes moved from the laptop to the red notebook to my face. He was calculating. I could see it. The same rapid assessment he used in boardrooms, the quick math of risk and reward, the search for an exit, but the dining room had only one door. And Emily sat between him and the hallway. "What is this?" Jason said. Still not a question. A demand. I pressed play. The screen filled with Robert's face. He was sitting in this very study, in the brown leather chair I had given him for his 60th birthday. The bookshelves behind him were lined with history texts and biographies. The lamp cast a warm circle of light across his shoulders. He looked thin. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes tired, but his voice was steady. The voice of a man who had rehearsed this moment in his mind for 2 decades and finally found the courage to say it out loud. "My name is Robert Allen Warren. I am a retired history teacher at Savannah West High School. I am recording this on September 14th, 2024, because I have been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and I do not have much time left." Jason's hand moved toward the laptop. I placed my palm flat on the table between his fingers and the screen. "You are going to watch this," I said. "All of it," Robert continued. His eyes looked directly into the camera, and for a moment it felt as though he was looking directly at me across the kitchen table, across the weeks since his death, across everything I had learned, and everything I still could not understand. On September 12th, 2004, my son Jason attended a party at a dormitory near the University of Georgia campus in Athens. A young woman named Amelia Dawson was at that party. She was 19 years old. At approximately 1:30 in the morning, Amelia fell from a 3rd-floor balcony. She struck the concrete below and suffered a traumatic brain injury, a fractured spine, and multiple broken bones. Robert paused. He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose the way he always did when he was about to say something that hurt. Jason called me at 2:14 that morning. He told me a girl had fallen. He told me he had been standing near her on the balcony. He told me he was scared. I drove to Athens. I arrived at the hospital at 4:50 in the morning. Amelia was in surgery. Her mother, Grace Dawson, was sitting alone in the waiting room. She had $11 in her bank account. She had no insurance. She had no one. I looked at Jason. He was not moving. His face was white, absolutely still, as though the blood had retreated somewhere deep inside him where no one could reach it. His hands lay flat on the tablecloth. The Tag Heuer had stopped catching the candlelight. It looked dull now. Just metal. Robert's voice filled the dining room like smoke. I made a decision that night. I told Grace I would pay for Amelia's care. Every payday. $1,500. For as long as it took. I asked her not to go to the police. I told her I would make it right. I believed I was protecting my son. He paused again. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. I was not protecting Jason. I was protecting myself from the truth about what my son had become. Emily pressed her hand over her mouth. Tears slid down her cheeks and fell onto the white tablecloth, darkening the fabric in small circles. Jason took the second chance I gave him and built an empire on lies. Warren Capital Partners is a fraud. I have included financial records on this drive that document a Ponzi scheme spanning 8 years and affecting more than 200 families. My son stole their money the same way he stole Amelia's future. Quietly, deliberately, without remorse. Robert leaned closer to the camera. His eyes glistened. "Kathy, if you are watching this, I am sorry. I should have told you. I should have told you every single day for 20 years, but I was afraid you would look at me the way I looked at myself in the mirror every morning. I loved you with everything I had, and I failed you. Please finish what I could not. Give Amelia her justice. Give those families their money back, and tell Jason that his father loved him. But love is not the same as silence." The video ended. The screen went dark. The dining room was so quiet, I could hear the candle flames bending in the draft from the window. Jason stood up. His chair fell backward and hit the hardwood floor. He moved toward the hallway. 3 steps. 4. His hand reached for the front door handle. The door opened before he could turn it. Agent Torres stood on the porch. Behind him, 4 FBI agents in dark jackets spread across the front yard. Blue and red lights pulsed silently from 2 unmarked vehicles parked on Liberty Street. The gray sedan that had been there since 4 o'clock was now joined by a black SUV blocking the driveway. Jason's BMW sat behind the SUV, already being photographed by a woman in a windbreaker with yellow letters across the back. "Jason Michael Warren," Torres said. His voice was calm, professional, almost gentle. "You are under arrest." They turned him around. They put his hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut, with a sound no louder than a latch closing on a cabinet door. Jason did not speak. He did not look at me. He stared straight ahead as they walked him down the porch steps and across the yard, past the magnolia tree Robert had planted the year Emily was born. Nicole stood on the sidewalk. She watched them put Jason into the back of the SUV. She did not cry. She held her arms across her chest and stood perfectly still, like a woman who had already grieved for something long before it was officially gone. I leaned against the doorframe. The red notebook was still on the dining table. The pecan pie sat untouched on the counter. The candles still burned. Robert's voice echoed in my chest. "Love is not the same as silence." I squeezed my own hand 3 times. 1, 2, 3. "I know, Bobby. I know." The morning after they took Jason, the television would not stop saying his name. I sat in Robert's chair with a cup of coffee I had not touched. The local news ran the story at 6. Then again at 6:15. Then again at 6:30, with new footage. A reporter stood outside the glass doors of Warren Capital Partners on Broughton Street, her hair blowing sideways in the October wind, her voice steady and practiced. Savannah financial advisor Jason Michael Warren was arrested last night at his mother's home on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. Federal prosecutors allege that Warren operated a Ponzi scheme through his firm, Warren Capital Partners, defrauding more than 200 clients of an estimated $47 million over 8 years. $47 million. I set my coffee down. The number floated in front of me like something I could not grab. Robert and I had spent 40 years stretching $52,000 a year across a mortgage, 2 children, groceries, and $1,500 every 2 weeks for a girl named Amelia, and our son had stolen $47 million from people who trusted him. The footage cut to Jason's office. FBI agents carried cardboard boxes through the front door. A woman in a yellow FBI windbreaker sealed the entrance with crime scene tape. Through the glass I could see Jason's desk. A wide mahogany surface with a leather chair that probably cost more than Robert's truck. On the wall behind it hung a framed photograph of the Savannah skyline at sunset. Jason had always loved that skyline. He had once told me he wanted to own it. I thought he was joking. By noon the story had gone national. CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Every channel showed the same mugshot. Jason staring into the camera with a face I barely recognized. Not angry, not afraid. Empty. The face of a man who had finally run out of calculations. Patricia called at 1:15. She spoke quickly, listing facts the way she listed case points. Jason's assets had been frozen by federal order. The penthouse on East Bay Street, seized. The BMW, impounded. 3 bank accounts in Jason's name, locked. 2 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, flagged by international cooperation with Cayman authorities. The fake passport under James David Walker had added a charge of identity fraud. "What about the clients?" I asked. Patricia paused. "A court-appointed receiver will audit the books. Most of the money is gone, Kathy. Jason spent it. Cars, real estate, personal accounts, campaign donations. The receiver will try to recover what they can, but some families will never see their savings again." I hung up and looked at Amelia's sunflower painting leaning against the wall. 200 families. 200 kitchen tables where someone was sitting right now, drinking coffee they could not taste, watching the same news, learning that the man they trusted with their retirement, their children's college fund, their future, had taken it all and turned it into mahogany desks and penthouse views. Robert had known. For years, he had known and could not stop it. All he could do was build a case on a USB drive and leave it in a red notebook for a 70-year-old woman who still believed in justice. Nicole came to the house that afternoon. She carried a single suitcase and a manila folder. She sat at the kitchen table, the same seat Jason had occupied 12 hours earlier, and opened the folder. Inside was a signed divorce petition. Her handwriting was small, precise, and final. "I filed this morning," she said. "Patricia helped me find an attorney." She did not cry. She looked exhausted. The way people look when they have spent so long preparing for something terrible that the arrival of it feels almost like relief. She told me she had moved what little money she had left into a separate account. She told me the penthouse was gone. She told me she had nowhere to go. "You will stay here," I said. It was not a question. Nicole looked up. Her eyes were red but dry. She nodded once. Emily arrived an hour later with Daniel and helped set up the guest room. Carol Henderson brought a casserole and did not ask questions. The house filled with the quiet sounds of people moving around a crisis. Opening cabinets, folding sheets, boiling water for tea, the small necessary rituals that hold a family together when everything else is falling apart. At 6 o'clock, a car pulled into the driveway. Nicole walked to the window and pressed her hand against the glass. A gray sedan stopped. And Agent Torres stepped out from the driver's side. He opened the rear door. Lucas climbed out holding a backpack in one hand and a half-painted model airplane in the other. Nicole ran to the porch. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around her son. Lucas stood still for a moment. The airplane balanced carefully in his fingers, and then he leaned into her and closed his eyes. I watched from the doorway. Lucas looked so much like Robert in that light. The gray eyes, the quiet mouth, the way he held on to things gently, as though he understood they could break. That evening, Lucas sat on the living room floor with his model airplane and a small bottle of blue paint. He worked carefully, painting the wings, with slow, even strokes. I sat in Robert's chair and watched him. The red notebook was on the side table beside me. Amelia's sunflower painting hung on the wall above the fireplace now. Emily had put it there after dinner without saying a word. Lucas looked up at me. His brush stopped. Blue paint gathered at the tip like a tiny raindrop. "Grandma," he said. "Was my dad a bad person?" The living room went still. Emily froze in the kitchen doorway. Nicole's hand stopped over the dish she was drying. The clock on the wall ticked. The candle on the mantel flickered. I opened my mouth. But the words did not come. Not yet. The federal courthouse in Savannah sits on Bull Street, 4 blocks from the bank where Robert sent his money every 2 weeks for 20 years. I had driven past it 1,000 times and never once imagined I would walk through its doors to watch my own son stand trial. Emily held my arm as we climbed the marble steps. November wind pressed against our backs. The oak trees along the sidewalk had dropped most of their leaves, and they scraped across the stone in dry circles. Nicole stayed home with Lucas. We had agreed the boy should not see his father like this. Not yet. Maybe. Not ever. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I expected. Dark wood paneling. A high ceiling with brass light fixtures that cast a yellowish glow over everything, as though the room existed in a permanent, late afternoon. 2 rows of long wooden benches filled with reporters, attorneys, and strangers who had come to watch. On the left side, behind the prosecution table, sat 11 men and women I did not recognize. Some were elderly. Some were young. One woman held a tissue in her lap and stared at the floor. These were the victims. The 200 families reduced to 11 representatives who would sit in this room and listen to what had been done with their money. I sat in the second row on the right side. Emily sat beside me. Patricia was already at the prosecution table, reviewing documents with a federal attorney named Collins. Agent Torres stood near the back wall with his arms folded. watching the room the way he watched everything, quietly and completely. Then they brought Jason in. He entered through a side door flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. He wore an orange jumpsuit. No sport coat, no Tag Heuer, no leather shoes that clicked on hardwood floors. His hands were cuffed in front of him, and he walked with short steps because of the chain between his ankles. His hair was uncombed. His face was thin. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks. Which was probably true. He did not look at me. He sat down at the defense table beside his attorney, a tall man named Whitfield, who Jason had hired with money that no longer existed. Jason placed his cuffed hands on the table and stared forward. His eyes were fixed on the judge's empty bench as though he were studying it for a weakness. The judge entered. The Honorable Margaret Chen. Small, silver-haired, precise. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and opened the proceedings with a voice that left no room for performance. The prosecution began. Collins laid out the case methodically. Warren Capital Partners. 8 years of fabricated returns. 214 clients. $47 million. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. A fake passport. A planned flight to Grand Cayman. Evidence recovered from a USB drive provided by the defendant's own father, a retired school teacher who had spent 20 years secretly documenting his son's crimes while paying restitution to a victim Jason had never acknowledged. Collins paused and looked at the jury. 12 faces. Unreadable. Then he called his first witness. Grace Dawson. Grace walked to the stand slowly. She wore a navy blue dress and flat shoes. Her hands trembled as she placed them on the wooden rail. She looked older than when I had met her in Macon, as though the weight of telling this story in public had aged her overnight. She sat down, adjusted the microphone, and began. My daughter Amelia was 19 years old in September of 2004. She was a sophomore at the University of Georgia. She wanted to be an art teacher. Grace's voice cracked on the word teacher. She steadied herself. On the night of September 12th, she went to a party at a dormitory near campus. She called me at 10:30 to tell me she was having fun. That was the last time I heard my daughter's voice. The courtroom was silent. Not the silence of empty space, but the silence of held breath. Grace described the fall. The third-floor balcony. The concrete below. The 20 minutes Amelia lay alone before anyone called for help. The surgery. The diagnosis. Traumatic brain injury. Fractured spine. Permanent paralysis from the waist down. Loss of speech. A man came to the hospital at 4:50 in the morning, Grace said. He told me his name was Robert Warren. He told me his son had been at the party. He was crying so hard he could barely stand. She paused. He offered to pay for everything. Every doctor, every nurse, every therapy session. He begged me not to call the police. I had $11 in my checking account. My insurance had been canceled 2 months before. I had no one. So I said yes. I heard Emily exhale beside me. A long, shaking breath. Grace continued. 20 years of payments. $1,500 every 2 weeks. Robert's monthly visits under a false name. The small care facility in Macon. The art room. The sunflowers. Robert Warren gave my daughter her life back, Grace said. Not the life she was supposed to have, but a life, and he did it alone. In secret. For 20 years. Because his son never once came back to see what he had done. Collins waited a moment. Then he turned to a screen mounted on the courtroom wall. The prosecution would like to play a video statement from Amelia Dawson, recorded at the Macon Community Care Facility on October 28th of this year. The screen lit up. Amelia appeared. She sat in her wheelchair in the art room I had visited. Sunflower paintings covered the wall behind her. A letterboard rested on her lap. A brush was tucked behind her ear like a pencil. She looked into the camera with dark, steady eyes. A nurse held the letterboard, while Amelia pointed at letters with a thin wooden stick held between her teeth. One letter at a time. Slowly, deliberately, the courtroom watched. No one moved. The only sound was the soft tap of the stick against the board. Letter by letter, a sentence began to form on the screen beneath the video. Justice, justice, not. Not. The video paused. The screen held on Amelia's face. Her eyes steady, her mouth set. The stick poised above the next letter. The courtroom waited. The stick tapped the board again. T-H-the-S-A-M-E. Same. The words assembled on the screen beneath Amelia's face, like stones being placed one by one into a wall. The courtroom did not breathe. 12 jurors sat motionless. The woman with the tissue in the front row pressed it against her mouth. Judge Chen's hands rested flat on her bench. Even Jason's attorney had stopped writing. As. Amelia's eyes never left the camera. Her jaw worked carefully around the stick. Each letter chosen with the kind of deliberate patience that only someone who has lost their voice truly understands. Every tap was a word she could no longer speak. Every letter was a sentence she had carried inside her for 20 years. Forgiveness. Forgiveness. The full sentence appeared on the screen in white text against a dark background. Justice is not the same as forgiveness. Amelia lowered the stick. It rested against her chin. She looked into the camera for 3 more seconds, and then she did something no one expected. She smiled. Not a large smile. A small, private curve of her lips, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who has said exactly what they meant and has nothing left to prove. The video ended. The screen went dark. The courtroom remained silent for what felt like an entire minute, but was probably only 10 seconds. I could hear the ventilation system humming behind the walls. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Judge Chen removed her glasses, cleaned them with a cloth, and placed them back on her face. She looked at the jury. The court will take a brief recess before closing arguments. The recess lasted 40 minutes. I sat on a wooden bench in the hallway with Emily. Neither of us spoke. Grace Dawson sat 3 benches away, her hands folded in her lap. She did not look at me, but at one point she reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. I could not see what it was from where I sat, but I knew. A 19-year-old girl with paint under her fingernails and a future that stretched all the way to the horizon. The closing arguments took 2 hours. Collins was methodical, clinical, devastating. He listed numbers and dates and account transfers the way a surgeon lists incisions. Whitfield, Jason's attorney, argued diminished judgment, family pressure, the complexity of financial markets. His words sounded hollow inside the dark wood courtroom, like coins dropped into an empty well. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 22 minutes. When they returned, the foreperson stood. A middle-aged man in a gray suit. His hands were steady. His voice was clear. On the count of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of securities fraud, guilty. On the count of money laundering, guilty. On the count of identity fraud, guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. 5 counts. 5 times the word guilty fell into the courtroom like a hammer striking wood. Jason sat perfectly still. He did not flinch. He did not close his eyes. Enter 4. Akir Day. D. Ronda. He stared at the table in front of him, as though he were reading something written in the grain of the wood that no one else could see. Judge Chen scheduled sentencing for the following week. But when the day came, she did not delay. "Mr. Warren," she said. Jason stood. The chains between his ankles clinked softly. "You were given every advantage. A loving father, a devoted mother, an education, a family. You took those gifts and converted them into instruments of harm. You defrauded 214 families of $47 million. You abandoned a young woman whose life you destroyed. You allowed your father to carry your guilt for 20 years until it killed him." She paused. The courtroom was so still, I could hear the pen of the court reporter stop moving. "This court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years. Restitution in the amount of $47 million is ordered to be paid to the victims through the court-appointed receiver. 25 years. Jason's attorney placed a hand on his shoulder. Jason did not react. He stood like a man who had already left the room long before the sentence was read. The marshals led him away through the side door. He passed within 8 feet of me. For the first time since the trial began, he turned his head. Our eyes met. I searched his face for something. Remorse, anger, fear. I found none of those. What I found was recognition. The quiet understanding of a man who finally saw himself clearly and could not bear the reflection. The side door closed behind him. I sat for a moment. Emily's hand was on mine. I looked down at our fingers, intertwined on the wooden bench. I thought of Robert's hand in the hospital. 3 squeezes. "I love you." I thought of Amelia's stick tapping the letterboard. Justice is not the same as forgiveness. I thought of Robert's voice on the video. Love is not the same as silence. 3 sentences. 3 truths. None of them contradicted each other. I stood up. Emily and I walked toward the exit. In the hallway, Grace Dawson was waiting. She stood near the tall windows where November light fell across the marble floor in pale rectangles. She looked at me. I looked at her. 20 years of silence and payment and secrecy stood between us, and none of it mattered anymore. Grace extended her hand. I took it. Her fingers were thin and warm. She squeezed once. I squeezed back. Neither of us spoke. Then I walked down the courthouse steps into the late afternoon sun. The air was cool. The oak trees on Bull Street had lost the last of their leaves. The branches stood bare against a sky that was turning gold at the edges. I thought of Lucas at home, sitting on the living room floor, painting the wings of his model airplane blue. I thought of the question he had asked me 3 weeks ago. Grandma, was my dad a bad person? I still did not have the answer. But I was walking toward it. Spring came to Savannah the way it always does. Slowly at first, then all at once, as though the city had been holding its breath through winter and finally decided to exhale. The azaleas opened along Liberty Street in waves of pink and white. The live oaks thickened with new leaves. The air turned warm and soft and smelled like jasmine and fresh-cut grass and the river. In the backyard, behind the house Robert and I had shared for 41 years, a row of sunflowers pushed through the soil. I had not planted them. Lucas had. He had found a packet of seeds in the garage, tucked behind Robert's old toolbox. And one Saturday morning in February, he carried them outside, dug 12 small holes along the fence with a kitchen spoon, and dropped a seed into each one. He watered them every day before school. He checked them every afternoon. When the first green shoot appeared in March, he ran inside and grabbed my hand and pulled me to the yard. Look, Grandma, he said. They are coming up. I knelt beside him in the dirt and looked at the tiny shoot bending toward the light. I thought of Amelia's paintings on the wall of the care facility in Macon. I thought of the sunflower canvas that now hung above our fireplace. I thought of a 19-year-old girl who wanted to be an art teacher and instead learned to hold a brush between her teeth because a boy at a party left her on the concrete and never came back. The sunflowers grew. By April, they were taller than Lucas. By May, they stood along the fence like a row of bright, patient witnesses. Their faces turned toward the morning sun. It was on a Saturday in May that I finally answered Lucas's question. We were sitting on the back porch. He was finishing his model airplane, the same one he had been painting since the night he arrived at my house with a backpack and a half-finished dream. The wings were blue now. The body was white with a thin red stripe. He held it up to the light and studied it the way Robert used to study essays, looking for the one detail that made everything else make sense. Grandma, he said. He did not look at me. You never answered my question. I knew which question. It had lived in the house with us all winter, sitting in corners, leaning against door frames, waiting. Your dad did a terrible thing when he was young, I said. And then he did more terrible things because he never faced the first one. He hurt people. He hurt a lot of people. I paused. The sunflowers swayed in the breeze along the fence. But a person is not only the worst thing they have ever done. Your grandfather believed that. He spent 20 years trying to fix what your dad broke. Not because your dad deserved it, but because Amelia deserved it. Lucas was quiet for a long time. He set the airplane on his knee. Do you think Dad can get better? He said. In there. I do not know, I said. But I hope so. And hoping is not the same as pretending. He nodded. Then he picked up the airplane and held it out to me. I finished it, he said. I want to put it on Grandpa's desk. I took the airplane. It weighed almost nothing. I carried it inside and placed it on Robert's desk, next to the lamp, next to the spot where the red notebook had once been hidden in a locked drawer. The small blue airplane sat in the warm light as though it had always belonged there. The following weekend, Amelia came to Savannah. Grace drove her up from Macon in a van equipped with a wheelchair ramp. Nicole helped them into the house. Emily made sweet tea. Carol Henderson brought a pecan pie made from the recipe taped inside my cabinet door, the one with Robert's note at the bottom, for Jason. He always comes back for the pie. Carol had crossed out Jason's name with a pencil and written above it, for everyone. Amelia sat in the living room in her wheelchair, beneath her own sunflower painting. She looked up at it, then looked at me, and smiled the same small, private smile I had seen on the courtroom video. Grace placed the letterboard on Amelia's lap. Amelia tapped with her stick. T-H-A-N-E-O-U. I knelt beside her. I took her hand. I squeezed it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. She squeezed back. 1, 2, 3. I do not know if she understood what the 3 squeezes meant. Maybe Grace had told her. Maybe Robert had taught her during one of his secret visits under a false name, reading biographies and sitting beside her in the art room while sunflowers dried on the wall. It did not matter. The meaning traveled through our hands the way it always had. I love you. Not the love between a husband and a wife. Something wider. Something that included 20 years of payments and silence and guilt and art and seeds planted by a 12-year-old boy who still believed people could grow. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, I sat in Robert's chair. The rooster clock ticked on the wall, still slightly crooked. Lucas was asleep upstairs. Nicole was reading in the guest room. The sunflower painting glowed above the fireplace in the lamplight. I opened the red notebook to the last page. Below Robert's trembling words, I picked up a pen and wrote one final line. Justice is not the same as forgiveness. I closed the notebook. I pressed it against my chest. I squeezed my own hand 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Good night, Bobby. If this story touched you, I would be grateful if you stayed for the next one. Sometimes, the truth hurts more than fiction. Sometimes, it heals more too. I will see you there.